Okay, we're going to answer the Bible question today. Bible prophecy about Israel and Syria, discussing what's going to happen in the last days. It's going to be exciting. But first, we're going to pass through the basement and throw a tomahawk or two. I'll get behind me where you can see me and the target. That's called tomahawk throwing. These I made on a forge outside on a wood fire. That's how it's done. Okay, do you want to know something about what's happening right now in Bible prophecy? There are Bible prophecies being fulfilled today, right now, over in Israel and Syria. Prophecies that were made hundreds and thousands of years ago, 2,500 years ago and more. So we're going to be looking at that. What are the last days? What happens in the last days? You're living in the last days, and you're going to see those Bible prophecies. The last day appears in the Bible 16 times. Last days, plural, appears 8 times. Of those 8 times, 3 appear in the Old Testament. So you see it here on the computer screen. We're going to take and click on last days, and we have our passage, and then we'll click again in the book of Isaiah, and we'll find another last days, and then we'll click again in Micah. Now what I've done is I've taken those passages and put them here in my Word document in large letters so I can see them without my glasses, and so that you can see them on your little cell phone. So we're going to go through those, and I'm going to show you also a map that's going to tell us about things happening right now today in Israel and Syria. Now this prophecy was made about 2000 BC, or about 5,000 years ago. This is the very first last days prophecy. Jacob is about to die. Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes. And so Jacob calls his son, said, "Gather yourselves together that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days." What this does is establish for us the meaning of last days, because he goes through all 12 sons. We won't go through those. And he tells a little bit about each one and what's going to become of them and their lineage, their tribe. One of them in particular we'll look at, the tribe of Judah. Now remember, he has 12 sons, and he singles out one special son out of the 12. He said, "But thou art he whom thy brethren shall praise." Didn't say that about any of the others. "Thy hand shall be in the neck of thine enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee." The word Judah is the word from which is derived the word Jew, because the 12 tribes, the 10 tribes were carried off to Syria 100 years earlier, and then Judah was carried off last, and Judah came back along with a portion of the other tribes, but mainly the tribe of Judah. And so he is emphasizing what's going to happen to the Jews, to Judah, in the last days. He said, "Thy father's children shall bow down before thee." That's the descendants. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. "My son, thou art gone up." He stooped down. He crouched as a lion, and as an old lion, who shall rouse him up. Then he says, the scepter, that's the rod that a king holds, that he rules his throne with. "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet." That's an infant child that's sitting there at the king's feet. "Until Shiloh," and that word Shiloh Hebrew is he whose it is, he who possesses it. "Till Shiloh come, and unto him," so Shiloh's a person, "shall the gathering of the people be." So the people are going to gather together around he whose it is, who's someone who's going to come. This is a prophecy of Jesus Christ coming 2,000 years after this. Now the Bible predicts the nation from which the world's Messiah will come, the nation of Israel. And then it predicts the very tribe from which you'll come. 12 tribes, so he eliminates 11 tribes and singles out one tribe. And then it predicts the family line. In other words, out of the tribe of Judah were hundreds of family lineages. So God, 1000 BC, 1,000 years after this, singles out one line, the line of David. And then David has several sons. He singles out just Solomon, through which the lineage is going to come. And so we have in the Bible, starting in the book of Genesis, the lineage that unfolds right down to Jesus Christ. So when you come to the New Testament, you can read that lineage backwards all the way to Adam. So the Bible is a unified book that has maintained the lineage of Christ all the way from creation to Jesus Christ. So in that lineage, there's one family line, the line of David, Solomon, and then he actually gives the place of birth. We'll see that passage in a moment, Bethlehem, Ephratah. So he singles out one little town out of all of Israel, and one tribe and one family line in that town will produce the Messiah. Now, folks, that's a detailed prophecy. And then he singles out the time of birth. He tells Daniel that 490 years from a certain period of time, when the going forth the temple to be rebuilt, which we have documented the time, that but after that point, after 463 years, I think it was, or what was that? How many years was that? Okay, what he says was that out of that 490 years, after 7 years before the end of it, he said Messiah would be cut off. And that was fulfilled exactly 1 week before Jesus was crucified. So it gives us the time of his birth, and then it gives the manner of his ministry, that blind would see, the deaf would hear, and the lame would walk. And then it tells us that he'd be betrayed by his own, by a friend. And then it tells us the manner of his death, that he'd be crucified, hands and feet pierced, Isaiah, Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53. Then it prophesies his resurrection in Isaiah 54 and 55 and Psalm 24 and many other places, and his ascension into heaven. And then it prophesies that the Holy Spirit would be sent in the book of Joel and other places after his death, burial, and resurrection. And then it predicts his second coming. All of that, hundreds of passages, give us this kind of background, kind of fulfillment of prophecy. Now, here's a prophecy being fulfilled right now. This is the last days. This is in Micah chapter 4. By the way, it appears in Isaiah 2:2 through 4, exactly as it reads in Isaiah 4:1. So Micah copied Isaiah because he thought it was an important prophecy. So honoring Isaiah as a prophet, he recorded those passages and then added something to them. So I'm not going to read Isaiah since it reads identical. I'm going to read Micah. But in the last days, it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains. So in the last days, God's house will be established top of the mountain. Now, read it says top of the mountains. Jerusalem is about a half mile above sea level, and 15 miles away in Jericho is like 800 feet below sea level. So if you stand in Jericho 1,500 miles away and look up, you're looking up a mountain that's almost 2/3 of a mile high. In the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established to the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and it is, if you go to Jerusalem. And the people, here's key, and people shall flow unto it. So in the last days, people from all over the world are going to flow into Jerusalem. There's not another city on earth that has as many different people from all over the world come as tourists just to see that spot on the hill of the Lord where the temple once stood, just to visit. People shall flow into it, and many nations shall come. So the Gentiles, which is unusual, shall come and say, here's what they'll say: come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Now, all of that prophecy is not completely fulfilled. We're going to see an increase in these last days of the word of God coming forth from Jerusalem. Now, in the tribulation, 144,000 Jewish males, Revelation 7 and 14, chapter 7 and chapter 14, are going to become evangelists. And then 2 prophets will stand in the city of Jerusalem, and they will prophesy, and they will be executed by Antichrist, their heads cut off. So he said, the law go forth, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Here's something. He shall judge among many people and rebuke strong nations afar off. Now this is moving forward into the millennium. And they'll beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That's not yet been fulfilled. There's never been a time when we beat our swords into plowshares. In fact, it's time to melt down your hose and turn them into 9mm. It's time to melt down your old metal trucks and turn them into 223s. And they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree. So during the millennium, there's going to be a return to agriculture. Everybody's going to sit under his own vine and under his own fig tree. I've got both of those. In fact, I've got a place I can sit under my vine out there, but this is going to happen in Jerusalem. And none shall make them afraid. Now, right now, they are afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken it. Okay? Now, stated another way, this is not chronological. He's going to revisit this. He said, for all people will walk every one in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. Now, the others won't walk in the name of their God forever and ever. And they will walk in the name of their God, and they are right now. In Israel, right now, in Jerusalem, there are people worshiping different gods. And each one walks in the name of his God. And Israel walks in the name of their God. In that day, saith the Lord, will I assemble her that halteth. Israel is in a state of halting right now. Halting is when a horse stops walking, refuses to follow the reins, refuses to turn or go. He's halted. He said, I will assemble her that halteth, and I will gather her that is driven out. Many Bible prophecies speak of Israel being cast into the nations, scattered among multiple Gentile people, but in the last days being brought back. That prophecy is being fulfilled even as we speak. I'll gather her that is driven out, and her that I have afflicted. God afflicted his people Israel because he loves them. Now, God holds responsible those who attack, destroy, afflict Jews. God holds them responsible. But God's got his bad dogs on a string, and he can let them out or he can pull them in. And God has allowed, obviously, people like Hitler and others to come against his people as a form of judgment. The Bible said, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. So God chastens Christians, and he chastens the Jewish people when they don't walk in his way. And I will make her that halteth a remnant. A remnant is that portion that's left over. After the Second World War and the Holocaust, there was a remnant. Her that was cast far off, a strong nation. 1947-48, God made Israel, which was just a remnant, and was cast off. He brought them back to land and made them a strong nation. And the Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth ever forever. Now that latter part's not happened yet, but it's going to happen. Now it goes back again to the present. Now also, many nations are gathered against thee. Boy, that's true right now. That say, let her be defiled, let our eye look upon Zion. The Bible is a beautiful book of prophecy. But they know not the thoughts of the Lord. You see, Syria, Iran don't know God's thoughts. Egypt, Turkey, Russia, China, they don't know God's thoughts. But they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel. For he shall gather them as the sheaves into the floor. The sheaves are when you cut down a stalk of wheat, and it's got the stalk and it's got the grain on the end of it, and you put it on the threshing floor, and then you walk on it or beat on it so that you separate the grain from the chaff, and then you winnow it and isolate the grain from the chaff, which you then throw away. He said, for he shall gather them as sheaves into the floor. These are these nations. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion. So God tells Israel to prepare to stomp on those nations that are their enemies. For I will make thine horn iron. I saw that. I saw some. You know what they call the missile, the missile system that protects Israel? They call it the Iron Dome. I'll make thy horn iron, and I'll make thy hooves brass, and thou shalt beat them in pieces, many people. So many people, many nations, many Gentiles will be beaten in pieces by Israel. I will consecrate their gain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth. Now, here is another prophecy in this chapter that follows immediately. This is the continuation of reading. Now gather thyself in troops, he says to Israel. This is where we're going to come down to Syria. Gather thyself in troops. In other words, prepare your military. O daughter of troops, he hath laid siege against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. Now, I think this is a double meaning. It applies first to Jesus Christ. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah. Now this is the little town in Bethlehem where Jesus was born. Though thou be little among the thousands of Judah. Remember, the tribe of Judah would produce the Messiah. And the tribe of Bethlehem, we find out, is going to be the town. Yet out of thee shall come forth unto me he that is to be ruler in Israel. So you see what he's dropped back in his prophecy and told us about the origins of the one who's going to rule in this near future event. Out of thee shall come forth unto me he that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth, his existence, his activities, his movements, have been from of old. In terms of old, they've been from everlasting. In other words, there's never been a time when the goings forth of Jesus Christ were not taking place. He said, therefore will he give them up, this is Israel, the Jews, until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth. So this is a concept used in the scriptures as Israel travailing. It is talked about that also in Revelation 12. Until that time when she which travaileth hath brought forth, then the remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel. So he says there's coming a time when these Jewish people, the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the world, many nations, where God has driven them, where they've halted against obeying him. There's going to come a time when this remnant shall return unto the children of Israel. And that's how Israel started about 70 years ago, was a return of the Jews from all over the world. And he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide, for now shall he be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man, he's talking about Jesus here, shall be the peace. Jesus said, my peace I give you. When, here's the part where the modern prophecy of Assyria, when the Assyrian shall come into our land, this is the last days, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then shall we raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. Who the 7 shepherds and the 8 principal men are, we don't know. The shepherds are likely to be religious leaders in Israel, and the 8 principal men are likely to be military commanders or politicians controlling the military. So God's going to raise up 7 shepherds, and when that's fulfilled, you'll see it. You'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 principal men. You'll say that was the prophecy. And they shall waste the land of Assyria, with a sword, and the land of Nimrod, that's where Babylon was, in the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. So when Syria attacks Israel, God's going to raise up men who are going to resist and bring destruction upon the Syrians. It's interesting that God picks out the Syrians. He could have picked out any number of 100 nations that were surrounded Israel and were Israel's enemies, most of which do not exist today. They've ceased. They're no longer there. I mean, there's no way you can find Philistines today. They're gone. No way you can find Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites. They're all gone. They were Israel's enemies in that day. But the Assyrians still exist. They shall waste the land of Assyria with a sword, and the land of Nimrod in the entrances, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. Now, I looked this up. Ancient Syria composed northern Iraq, at one time all of what is Iraq. Syria existed over a period of several hundred years, and so it expanded and shrunk. Southeastern Turkey, northwestern Iran, and southeastern Syria. So the Syrian communities that are still left in Assyria, there's Syrian communities still left in Syria, numbers 400,000 people. In Iraq, 300,000 Assyrians. And in Iran, there's 20,000 Assyrians. And in Turkey, there's somewhere between 15 and 25,000 ancient Assyrians. So that people group, that bloodline still exists in that land. Okay, here is a map of the ancient Syrian Empire. This is at its greatest. It wasn't always this large. You see right here is Jerusalem. And this is the Dead Sea, and this is the Sea of Galilee, Gennesaret, right here. And so this basically is all of Israel. That's it. It's very small. And then here is Syria, and we call this Lebanon now up in this section. And then here is Iraq, Nineveh, Tigris, Euphrates rivers. Down here would be Kuwait. This is over in a portion of Iran, a portion of Turkey, right in here. And it was Egypt for a short period of time, but mainly this is the Syrian Empire right in here. And that comprises most of Syria, modern Syria, and a portion of Iran, and a little bit of Turkey right in there. So that's the place that the Bible speaks of, and so you can see it on a map now and know what we're talking about. Now here's what he says. And the remnant of Jacob, that's those that are left over, that's the people in Israel today, shall be in the midst of many people. There's plenty of Jews in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, South America, Mexico. Wow, there's Jews all over the world in every country. The remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people as a dew from the Lord and as a shower upon the grass. In other words, they're going to be a blessing. They're going to be refreshing in the nations where they are. Right now, the Jews already have a vaccine for the COVID virus, and they're producing it. They are leaders in medicine and other technologies. As the shower upon the grass, that tarrieth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men. Now, he says the first phrase again adds to it, and the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles. Many people, Gentiles. In the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest. A lion is to be feared. He's fierce. As a young lion among the flocks of sheep. Young lions tear the sheep. So Israel's going to be in this dual capacity. They're going to be a refreshing dew that causes the crops to grow among the Gentiles, among the people. But they're also going to be a fierce lion. A lion that brings great destruction. A young lion among the flocks of sheep, who, if he go through both, treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. Thine hand shall be lifted upon thine adversaries, and all thy enemies shall be cut off. So, if you lived in Israel today, you'd be close to a bomb shelter. You'd have a concrete roof, at least a foot thick, with reinforced rebar. And you'd be listening for a siren to go off, which gives you anywhere from 20 seconds to half a minute, 40 seconds or so, to get to cover before a rocket hits your house or your yard and kills you. And so the Jews, many of them, live in fear and anxiety every single day. But there's coming a time real soon when they're going to rise up as a lion and they're going to destroy the Syrians. They're going to wipe them out. Now, this is not the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39. We went through that. You'll want to look at that one. That's a special prophecy. This is a different thing. This is dealing right now with what's going on over there. There's not a week goes by that we don't read of Israel bombing or using some unknown technology to set on fire something in Syria and Iran, and are bringing destruction. The Syrians and Iranians don't like to publicize that, but if you look carefully in the news, you will find all of a sudden a rocket factory just burst into flames. Now, was that from a satellite equipped with a laser that burnt a pipe, set it on fire? These things are not happening. There's no signs of a missile coming in, of a drone. Isolated, well-protected places are just suddenly bursting into flames. Israel is a lion among the sheep, and they don't know the thoughts of the Lord, the Gentile nations, to realize that God's standing with Israel and will continue to. So this is just a one little portion of basically one book I've gone over, and there are hundreds of prophecies like this in the Bible. So get your Bible and read it and believe it just like it's written, because it is telling us what's going on right now, and it tells us what is going to happen. Now, I think next time I will go through the other prophecies of the last days that Jesus and the apostles spoke of, and tell you a little bit more about some of the things we see coming up on the earth that indicates that we are living at that time when Shiloh will come. All right, that's all for tonight.